Alright folks, this is Jason with the Primal Outdoors channel, and we're still working on the new interior build I'm doing on my van, and today we're going to be working on the heating system. Now my old build, if you've been following along, you knew that I had a propane heating system and it worked okay. My challenge with it was finding places that would fill propane, especially when I'm on the road. Here locally I knew places to go and it's not a problem, but when traveling, finding locations that still actually do fill is sometimes a challenge and something I don't want to deal with anymore. I can't put a diesel heater, or I don't want to put a diesel heater in because my van runs on unleaded fuel. So what I'm going to do is put a heater in that runs on unleaded fuel. And what I did is I found this heater from Velit, and it runs on gasoline. And the nice thing is about that is I will be able to just go to any pump and fill up myself without having to deal with finding a fill location, and then when I do find a fill location, getting somebody to come out and fill the propane for me, which is a super hassle. So I'm really excited about this upgrade, and if you're interested in how to do this, follow along in this video. So something I've been doing a lot in the van is just bringing in the different components like the Velit AC, the calm volt system that I'm going to be putting in, and then my water tank, and then I've got my heater from Velit as well that I'll be putting in. And I've just been kind of playing with it and trying to figure out, like Jenga, how everything is going to fit in here and work the way I want. And then I take a lot of measurements and I go back and I've been drawing everything in some detail in Fusion 360. Alright, so before I get too crazy when putting the subfloor in, I do want to cut out the space I'm going to need in the floor for the intake and exhaust for this gasoline heater. Now the gasoline heater did come with this little gasket that goes over. I'm going to actually use that as a template so that way I can figure out where I want to cut. And then when I put my subfloor in, I'll go ahead and put this metal plate that was also provided onto the subfloor, and that will protect everything. So one thing that you're going to have to think about if you're going to be installing a gasoline heater like this Velit or even a diesel heater is how you're going to fuel it. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either have a secondary tank that it pulls fuel from, or you can pull fuel from the main tank, as long as like this you're going to be using the same fuel. So in my case I got a gasoline heater because I have a gasoline vehicle. Of course, if you have a diesel heater in a gasoline vehicle, you're not going to want to do that. But in my case, this will work out. Now, I could plumb directly into my main fuel tank and be able to run it that way, but I didn't want to do that just because my van doesn't get the best gas mileage, and I pretty much want to keep all the fuel I have for driving. So what I did is I installed right up here where my spare tire used to be a remote tank. And that remote tank is not only going to feed the gasoline heater, but it's also going to be a backup fuel source for me, because I'm also going to have a remote transfer pump that's going to allow me to transfer fuel from that tank into my main tank in times of need. Now, if you do decide to tap into your main tank, they do give you a kit in order to do that, which has a little piece inside here that would allow you to put that inside your tank. And then of course you got your fuel hose and everything that you need to plumb it back to the heater itself. Alright, I just want to take a quick look to where we're at right now. I got the electrical closet all framed out, and then I have the plumbing closet as well, pretty well framed out. And then I just have some things laying in here to kind of see how things are looking. So this is where the gasoline heater is going to go, and that is all set up there. It still needs a few things before it's fully mounted. And then of course we still have some plywood and things we need to do, but the water tank will go there as well. And then I'll have some extra storage underneath here. But on the electrical closet side, I'll have my battery system down here. There'll be a shelf here going across where the AC goes, and then the AC will duct out the side there where you can see the hole in the side of the van. Alright guys, so I'm getting ready to install this heater into the van. So first of all, I need to put the little studs in that come in the hardware kit. There's going to be 4 of them. I'm going to put all of those in. Then once I have them in, I'm going to put the gasket on. This is going to be really important to make sure that you don't get exhaust fumes coming inside the vehicle. So that goes on just right over the top of your intake and exhaust. Once I put that on, then I want to put this plate on, and this plate will go down and over your studs, and then you'll have your nuts that will go down, and you want to tighten them down with a torque wrench to 7 Newton meters. All right, so I'm getting ready to install this heater into my cabinet here. Now it is going to be all the way in the back, and so my plan is to have a ducting hose that will go out the front and feed up to the front of the cabinet, which will then blow all the hot air into the main living space. But because of the way that I have it mounted in here, there's not a lot of room behind the heater to intake air. So what I've done is I've taken the ducting that came with it, and I'm going to have it ducted back around like this in a U shape, just because I'm concerned that where the heater will be, there'll be insulation back there, and I don't want the insulation to potentially clog up the heater. So by having the duct and have it suck air from up here, it'll always be clear. But I am a little bit concerned with the hard bin that it might have a problem. So I'm going to go ahead, just set it in there, and I'm just going to jury rig the wiring enough to where I can actually get the heater going and get it sucking fuel, and we're just going to do a test run before we go ahead and completely install it. Well, it looks like we have a successful test. The heater did come on. It did take me a minute to get it primed because there was some air in the fuel line, but once it got primed, it fired right up. Seems to be going. Got the remote here, just kind of in hand. And yeah, seems to be working. So with that test out of the way, I want to go ahead and now get it completely mounted in so that I can move on with other projects. All right, before I installed the heater, I did already put my exhaust, the intake, and a little chunk of fuel line on, because right now it's really easy for me to access putting these clamps on and making sure that they're good and secure. Once I actually install it, they'd be kind of sucked up into the vehicle, and it'd be really hard for me to get a tool up in here and to make sure that these were well secured. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing shoved into place and fully mounted. All right, so we're underneath the vehicle. I just wanted to show a couple things. So I've got the intake, the exhaust coming out. The intake is running over to here, well away from where the exhaust is. The exhaust is running here and then out the back of the bumper. It might be running a little too close to this one shackle here. I might have to play with that. If that's the case, I may end up welding a little tab right here so I can mount the exhaust more over this direction. But I'm trying to keep it away where you can see right here, you can see where I get mud and stuff. And that's something I'm really thinking about, is making sure that where the exhaust is a spot that isn't going to get a bunch of mud thrown all over it, because I have had problems with heating systems like this in the past that have external intakes and exhausts with mud getting all over them because I off-road. All right, so up here you can see I have two little fuel pumps. The blue one is actually my transfer pump that's going to pump fuel from the spare tank to my main tank. This other fuel pump here is the one for the heater. Just before the pump, I have the fuel filter, so that way I can filter the fuel going into the pump so I don't burn up the pump with any dirty fuel. And then that will also make sure that clean fuel goes into the heater. I'm getting ready to run another test just to make sure everything's working great before I route all the wiring, but I just wanted to show you just how much wire you do get pre-wired for your remote, so that way you can pretty much have this anywhere you want in your vehicle where you're going to find it the most convenient. All right, folks, well, we are out and about. The van is not actually completely done, but I ran out of time and I needed to get down the road because I am going to Flagstaff for the big Overland Expo there. Once I'm done with the expo, I'll head back to the shop and wrap up the last few things that have to be done in order to complete the entire build, but it is good enough for the moment. Now, as far as the Velit heater is concerned, it is all installed and functioning. There's a couple little things I still need to do once I get back to my shop. Like as I mentioned earlier in the video, that I am gonna duct it from back here out the front. I haven't done that yet, but it's actually pretty warm right now, and I have used the heater a little bit in the van in the mornings when it's cool, but for the most part, I haven't really used it a whole lot. So one little change I did have to make after I left the shop is I had to change how I routed the fuel line to the pump. I was having a little bit of problem with the heater blowing a lot of black smoke and getting a lot of soot, and what I found was I was getting air in my fuel line. So I had to do a better job at routing the fuel line to the pump and making sure that it gravity fed to the pump, and then I had to take more time to make sure that the line coming from the pump went straight up to the heater and there wasn't any little dips that would trap air. So as I mentioned, you do have a controller that allows you to control your heater. This allows you to do basic functions like set a temperature that you want to maintain, or you can set it to manual to where basically you just set a power level that you want it to maintain. I've been using it on the temperature control, and that just allows me to adjust it. I can just rotate this dial and set whatever temperature I want it to be at, and then the heater will auto run and come on and off as it needs to maintain that temperature in the van. But this controller also allows you to do other functions that are useful, and you want to be aware of those. One of those functions is the ability to clean the system. If you're running the system at a lower state, a lot of times you can sometimes get some soot that does build up over time, and this will affect how well the heater can start and run. So there is a cleaning mode that basically will just heat up the system and burn off that soot. So you can use that every once in a while when necessary. It's not something you have to do all the time, but it is nice that it's available. But another feature that is super handy, especially when you're first getting set up, is you have a prime pump feature. And this will help you get some of that air out of the system. So you can turn this on, it basically just starts running the pump and pushing fuel through it. Now, you can do it from here, but what's really nice about this heater is it does have an app that allows you to control the heater as well, and you can do that feature as well from the app. And what I find is it's really nice to actually do it with the app, because I can be down there by the heater and I can actually watch the fuel going up through the line, so I know when to stop priming, because you don't want to flood the system either. And what I actually do is I disconnect the fuel line from the heater, and then I run the priming feature until I start getting fuel out of the line, and then I stop it, then plug the fuel line into the heater from there. All right, folks, so that pretty much wraps up everything when it comes to my new Velit heater. If you guys are looking for a gasoline heater for your build, definitely check out my link down below. If you have any other questions about this gasoline heater, leave that in the comments, and I'll catch you guys again outside.